Alrighty guys, good afternoon everyone here at the Earth Festival. My name is Scott Wallace and I'm an environmental scientist and a law student and also an educator. And so what I'm here today to talk to you guys about is a transformation of culture, and particularly looking at re-evaluating our relationship with nature. And the main sort of questions that I'd like us all to consider is who or slash what are we? What do we believe in? What are our values? And are our actions actually in alignment with those values? Now, I've experienced this process over my whole life and come to some very scary realizations that perhaps my actions weren't in alignment with who I thought I was. So, hopefully you can see some of these slides, but it's not... Oh, what's going on?
Yes, we can do.
And there we go. Awesome. So I've just got an illustration here, just to sort of get us thinking about perhaps visualizing what our relationship has been with nature. So over here on the left-hand side, we've got an ego approach, and over on the right-hand side, we've got an eco approach. Now, I think it's really, really important to understand where we sit as a society, where we sit as a culture, and to understand what aspects of our culture and society have led to us believing and thinking certain things. So if we look on the left, we can see it's very human-centered. There's a term called anthropocentric. And so what we've got with this system, we have men on top, which is a reflection of this very capitalist patriarchy system which is in place where we've oppressed women. And then we have this hierarchy. Some animals are considered more important than others. Now, over on the right-hand side, we've got an eco approach where there's less about having one particular species at the top as an apex, and it's a bit more connected. It's a bit more inclusive of all members of the Earth community. So if over on the right-hand side seems to make sense to us, and this is something that we think we believe in, then we need to understand that perhaps our society is operating like this at the moment. Now I'm going to show you some of the reasons why I think our society is functioning over here on the left-hand side, and explain how important it is for us to actually shift our worldview, shift our mindset to think of things in an eco approach. Now, just pulling apart this system, this human-centered worldview is very, very pervasive. I believe it's the underlying worldview that we have in our world. Not everyone holds this worldview, but especially within developed Western society, this is how we often have seen ourselves. So we have this human superiority, this false assumption that humans are the most important species in the world. And as part of this, we have these very interesting hierarchies between ourselves and other creatures, other members of the Earth community. Now, I was, through my studies, I was exposed to various ideas of conservation and environmental sustainability, and we were told that some animals, are more important than others, and not only from, necessarily an ecological perspective, but we have the cute, cuddly, charismatic megafauna, your whales, your dolphins, tigers, pandas. All these animals are like the most revered animals on our planet to be looked after and have such moral significance. And then we start looking at other animals like, our companion animals, which are very, very important to us. We have deep emotional connections to them. And then we start looking at some of the food animals, the less important creatures of our planet. And then we get down to the non-animals, and other forms of life. And so my worldview used to reflect this, and through my studies it reinforced this worldview of human superiority, of speciesism, where we actually favour our interest, human interest, over all other species. Now we can take this a step further, and so within this hierarchy, as I mentioned earlier, it's not only human interests over everything else, but actually other creatures are more important than other creatures. And so it's very, very deeply entrenched within our society. We have this idea of commodifying nature, of owning nature. We refer to things in terms of ecosystem services where they can provide us as humans. We put a dollar value on natural resources, as we like to refer to them. And so if we look at the way we refer to nature and how we talk about things, we can see that it's very based off human interest. And so we have this idea that non-human animals are considered our property. So other sentient living creatures are considered things, are considered objects. Now, if anyone has any pets here, does anyone have a dog or a cat in their family? Yeah, so usually we consider these pets to be a part of our family, exactly. And so, but under the eyes of the law, this is an object, this is a something, and so we wouldn't consider these creatures to be a something. They're a someone capable of feeling, experiencing subjectively, have their own feelings, emotions, communities and ways of interacting. And so this idea that we can own nature, that it's there for us to be used, is really what's underlying our governance and our laws and the way we've actually interacted with the world. Now, I used to hold this belief of human superiority and started questioning this over the last few years as I started engaging in my environmental science studies and really thinking critically about who am I, what are my beliefs, and where do I sit in terms of these systems. And so the idea of human superiority and this separateness from nature is what we call institutionalized. So within all aspects of our life, within the government, within business, within law, medicine, religion, we have this idea that humans are separate from nature. When in fact we are looking at it objectively, we are another species on this planet, and we're sharing this planet with a whole number of different members of the Earth community, as I like to refer to them as. And so these ideas that we are better than and separate from nature is so deep within our minds, within our society. There's been so much conditioning that has convinced us that we are separate from nature, that we can own nature. And so really, how can we own our mother? How can we own that which gives us life? How can we put a dollar figure on nature? We are nature. And so it's no surprise that these ideas are common, and these ideologies express themselves in a whole number of ways in terms of what we choose to consume, how we relate to the natural world. It permeates so many things. And so, have you ever wondered why we love dogs, eat pigs, and wear cows? So, when I started really questioning this thing, why is it that I like whales and I want to protect them? The bloody Japanese, they're killing all these whales, but I'm happy to, eat my fish and consume other sea creatures. What is the objective difference between these creatures in terms of their right to life and to thrive and evolve and enjoy themselves? I thought there was a lot of difference. I've come to realize there may not be that difference at all. And so the reason why, within Western society we love dogs, eat pigs, wear cows is because of our cultural conditioning. Now, an aspect of this human-centeredness, we have this ideology which is known as carnism. Now, Dr. Melanie Joy was the woman who did a PhD on 4 or 5 years and just studied the psychology of eating meat, which I found very, very, very interesting. And her key point was asking people, why haven't we asked this question? Have we ever wondered why we do this? But why haven't we wondered why we do this? And so carnism is the invisible belief system or ideology that conditions people to eat certain animals. Some animals are edible, some animals are for conserving, some animals are companion animals, some are inedible. And so we have these arbitrary hierarchies and distinguishing features between creatures. And so now in say for Australia, the US, the UK, for us we consume, generally speaking, a lot of beef, a lot of cow flesh. However, in India, the Hindus, the cows are a sacred animal, they're a sacred creature. And so does that make it less acceptable to kill the creature if they can perceive it to be of cultural importance? Does it make it less important if we don't give these cows the same level of respect and moral significance as the Hindus do? Well, this just comes down to our culture. Depends to what we've been brought up with, what we've been taught, what we've been indoctrinated into believing. So we have these justifications when it comes to eating animals, that it's normal, natural, and necessary. And I also thought this for most of my life. I thought we had to be consuming animals, we needed to for survival, and it's just the way things are. But questioning these things really started to shake me up and challenge the way I interacted with the world. And I really realized that perhaps I'm not in alignment with who I really am. There was a photo here, but if you can envisage me about 5 years ago holding up a fishing line with a little fish on the end of it. I had a photo of me about 5 years ago. And there's me saying, I love fish, and the little fish is saying, keep telling yourself that, bro. So I was a marine conservationist protecting the oceans, through contributing to exploiting and consuming sea life. Now, throughout my whole majority of my studies, I associated with that being a marine conservationist. I'm there to protect the oceans, but did I really understand what love was? Did I love fish, or did I just enjoy the connection in terms of going underwater and hunting and gathering and fishing and killing fish? Maybe I just enjoyed the taste more than the actual life of that creature. And so I started questioning myself, who am I? What do I believe in? What are my actions? And coming to the point where realizing that 3/4 of our ocean's fisheries are actually completely, overexploited, fully exploited, or depleted. The oceans are dying, and so how can we have sustainable fishing if we look at the state of our oceans? Now, for me, I wanted to support the sustainable fisheries. I'd eat the sustainable sea life, the sustainable tuna, and do the fish guides to find out what's the better option. Because myself as a consumer, I wanted to feel good about my choices. We all want to be happy. We all want to think that, okay, this is what I believe in and my actions reflect that. But I really encourage you to all think about, are our actions reflecting what we believe? And taking it deeper, what do we believe? And what are the values most important to us, which I think for a lot of us is, respect, is compassion, is justice for not only ourselves but other animals and people on this planet. And so because of this conditioning, it leads to people making decisions and taking actions that may not be in alignment with who they are. And this is something that I realized. And when we look at it, my perspective was, it's just me fishing with my father on the weekend. Sure. But there's 700,000 people in Queensland that consider themselves fishermen. And so yes, it's just me, but it's also the other 699,000 people. So we look at the cumulative effect of individual actions, which is really the most important thing we need to understand. If everyone here all decided to, go to this stall over there and buy all their products, and they probably sell out, and we'd all have shirts, and we've supported that sector. That our money talks, and so whatever we decide to put money and time and energy into, we're going to support these industries. So we can either use this understanding of, our choices have a very big effect, and really think critically about what we are supporting. And so the recreational fishermen in Queensland catch more than all the commercial fishermen combined. Now this will be the same stats for, I'd say, most other states in Australia. Now wrap your head around that. So there's all this frustration about the commercial fishermen, when in fact it's each person with their rod on the weekend, during the week, catching, extracting from the oceans, that is having a bigger effect than all the commercial fishermen. And so I cut out my contribution to the commercial fishing industry and just thought, I'm only going to eat the fish that I catch, or that I know a friend has caught and I know how they've killed the fish and etc. If I wanted to protect our oceans, I may not be going about it in the best way. Come on, man. Excellent. And so one of the other aspects of our relationship with nature and non-human animals has been, we've exploited animals in a number of ways for scientific testing and research. We have them as, companion animals, where they're subjected to buying and selling as a commodity. But also the animal agriculture industry, so the farming sector accounts for the overwhelming majority of our animal exploitation and use, and the production of a whole number of products and byproducts from animals. Now, the animal farming sector, I'm just going to run through some stats here that are relevant for Australia and some of the global statistics. Now, in Australia, 56% of our total land use is just used for grazing livestock. This is over half of our country. Now, we can see with this little graph down here that the plants for human food, we use about only 3.5% of our total area to grow all of our plant foods. And so the animal farming sector is the overwhelmingly, biggest land use that we have in our country. Now, bring it to a more regional level. So my home state is Queensland, and so the reason why the animal farming sector uses a lot of land is because we have to firstly clear a lot of forests and woodland to then either grow crops and grains to feed to animals, and sort of clear area to grow pasture and grasses for them. So it's a very land intensive practice. So here in Queensland, looking at some of the data from a few years ago, between 2015 and 2016, we were clearing around 400,000 hectares of land per year. So during that year. Now that's the size of the Gabba, which is the biggest stadium in Queensland. The size of the Gabba cleared every 3 minutes. And so looking into the statistics, the mining, so the amount of area cleared for settlements, only 0.25% of all that land cleared was for settlements. Only half of a percent of all that land was cleared for infrastructure, so roads and developments and stuff like that. And the mining sector only accounted for 0.75% of all of that land cleared during that year. This was so surprising for me, because during my studies, all I'd heard about was, cities are growing, their population's increasing, we're clearing land, we're clearing forests, the mining sector is destroying all this land. Yeah, that's all true, but hold up. 93.4% of all that land cleared in that year was for animal farming, was for the animal agriculture industry. So this is the single largest driver of deforestation and habitat loss and species loss in terms of terrestrial ecosystems that we have in our country. And this just wasn't a one-off year. This has been occurring for decades. And so I'm sure if you guys were to look at the latest research, it would say the similar thing. And this is extremely concerning. Why wasn't I taught about this during my studies as an environmental scientist? I didn't know about this. It's only after I finished my studies at a university which had the first environmental program in the state, if not Australia. It was very concerning when I found out this information. What is that? Oh yeah. So looking at the contribution to greenhouse gases and emissions. So some of the most conservative estimates are that the animal ag sector contributes to around 18% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and this is by the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. That's still more than the 13% of global emissions from the transport sector. So all the boats, cars, planes, trains, ships combined, we have more emissions from farming than all those than the transport sector, which is insane. Now, the FAO's, their estimates are very, very conservative, and it all comes down to how they do their modelling and what information they include. So taking this a step further, there was a group, World Watch Institute, back in 2006, and following their research, they estimated that the full animal ag system, which includes the transport of these products, the clearing, all the emissions from the livestock, the clearing of land, accounted for around 51% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this data has been superseded. There is some different information which puts it around 30, and in some places 40%. But just to highlight that it can be, whatever the actual value is, it's a lot more than people realised, and a lot more than the environmental scientists were taught. So there's a group called Beyond Zero Emissions. Now they did some research into the carbon intensity of the animal farming sector and agriculture in general. And their research, the stock standard way of measuring carbon CO2 emissions doesn't often include the land use and the enteric fermentation and waste, which is all the livestock farts and processing of their food, and all the savanna burning. When we include land use and all those factors, the national greenhouse gas emissions for Australia goes up to over 30%. And so that's pretty crazy. That shifts the focus of mitigation away from the energy sector to actually tackling the animal ag sector. Taking this a step further, most of the models we see for greenhouse gas emissions focus on a 100-year model, 100-year global warming potential. And so we know now that methane and nitrous oxide, a lot of these emissions, greenhouse gases from the animal farming sector, have a more detrimental effect in terms of contributing to global warming, climate change, than CO2. And so you're talking around 80 times more destructive is methane in terms of a greenhouse effect than CO2. So and that's because on a shorter time frame, these emissions have more of an effect. Methane, nitrous oxide are a lot worse than CO2. So when we actually model greenhouse gases in Australia on a 20-year time frame, because we don't have 100 years to act. We need to act now, we need to act today, we need to act with every decision we make. When we map it on a 20-year time frame, the agriculture industry accounts for 54% of Australians' national greenhouse gas emissions. What the hell? Now, this was when by the end, just when this was published just when I finished my degree. Wasn't aware of it. Wasn't aware of any of this information from World Watch Institute. Very, very concerning. And so this is for the agriculture sector collectively, not only animal farming, but over 80% of these emissions can be accounted for by livestock. So it's the single biggest contributor to greenhouse gases in our country, and these patterns are reflected, all across the world as well. Excellent. So the animal farming sector, just in summary, I've come to understand now, after my studies, that the animal sector is the single most destructive industry on our planet. It's the leading driver for climate change, for ocean dead zones, habitat loss, species loss, pollution, water consumption. It's insane the effect that this industry is having on the planet. Now, the United Nations has been trying to address this issue and put out research back in 2010, 8 years ago, which said we actually need to tackle our consumption and shift towards a plant-based diet if we want to address the worst effects of climate change. Again, I didn't hear about this. It's only the last few years that I started looking into this stuff. So why isn't it that as a scientist, that I wasn't given this information? Well, we can't expect the public to be aware of this if myself I wasn't given the opportunity to have received this information. So we need to also address the effects of the sector in terms of the effect on animals. Now, just bringing us back to this core theme of this presentation is reevaluating our relationship with nature. So far we know that through the consumption of animal products, massive ecological effect, and it is a supply and demand industry. So we are driving this destruction if we choose to consume these products, which I did for most of my life. In Australia, between September 2017 and December 2017. Now, I don't know how many people have seen that, but any guesses as to how many animals were slaughtered in Australia for farming during those 3 months? Any wild guesses?
1 million.
1 million. A bit more.
Billion.
So between those 3 months, 170 million sentient creatures were slaughtered in Australia. 3 months. Now, that's crazy, and this is inclusive of lambs, of chickens, of cows, of all these creatures. Now, the numbers are a lot more than this because there's a whole bunch of sectors which aren't included in this analysis, and this is straight off the Australian Bureau of Statistics. This is available for everyone. Go out there. All you need to do is just Google livestock ABS. And there's your data. You can see everything that's happening. And the value of these lives is $4.6 billion. So this is the economic value that we put on these lives. This is how much product was sold, because they refer to it as livestock products and numbers. So we can see there's a lot of vested interest in this industry. It does make a lot of pays a lot of bills, and is a massive contributor to our economy. However, if we have a system which is based around exploitation of animals and environmental destruction, we need to start questioning this. What purpose does this serve? And is there other ways to make money and feed our families and look after ourselves? Profits should not come before lives and economic benefit. So, coming to understanding about this sector, I've eventually realised that the quickest, cheapest, most effective way to minimise our footprint is to actually adopt a plant-based vegan diet, which is surprising because I thought if I rode my bike, if I took shorter showers, if I did these, recycling, then it's going to have a massive effect on my footprint. But that's all very important things, but we need to understand that this is what we can do in terms of to live in a way that minimizes our footprint. I resisted this for many years. I still wanted to eat my meat. I still wanted to eat chicken and all these products and meat, eggs and dairy, because it's just the way things were. And I never really questioned this until I started doing some research. And then it came to a point where if I wanted to be an environmentalist, I really need to look at my consumption, because I was supporting this industry that was destroying the planet that I'm trying to protect. We're all, I would assume most people here at Earth Festival have some interest and, and desire to minimize their footprint and protect this planet. And of course, as an environmental scientist, I wanted to do that as well. But I realized I was contributing to the most destructive industry on our planet. So the diet forms one component of veganism. Now, I used to think that veganism was the most extreme thing on the face of the planet. And I've only been vegan for a few years now, and used to come up with all the arguments against veganism. But, we understand that as our conditioning and societal influences has led us to believe that we are separate, we're better from nature, and animals are there for us to use and consume and exploit. It's no surprise that I thought veganism was extreme. I didn't necessarily understand it. Little did I know that I held all the beliefs of veganism before I realized. And so what veganism is, because a lot of people just have this idea that it's tree-hugging hippies and it's, you eat bloody lettuce and that's about it, but it's actually not that. It's so much more than that. And so veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude as far as possible and as practicable all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of humans, animals and the environment. So in dietary terms, it's the practice of dispensing with all products that are derived from animals, so no animal products at all. But this seems pretty full on. We like our cheese, we like our meat, we like our eggs and all these products. And it's just the way our culture has convinced us. This is what's normal within our societies, to consume these products. And as soon as we think something which opposes this is threatening, my choices, we have a lot of resistance towards it. So, almost every vegan I've spoken to now wasn't always vegan. We've all been through the process of coming to these understandings. And there's so many benefits of veganism. And so we can look at it from a compassion perspective, non-violence, for the planet, for the animals. There's so many reasons to consider veganism as an approach to actually a philosophy which drives our interactions and relationship with nature. Now, let's look at, for example, the indigenous people of countries all across the world. They had they understood that they weren't separate to nature. They had a very, they were intrinsically linked with the environment, with all the creatures they shared space with. And so they didn't own land, they didn't own animals, they didn't own the nature. They are nature, they were nature, we are nature. We're not separate to the land, we are the land. And so obviously it's not possible for us to go back to a state where we're not developed. But in modern developed society, I believe that veganism is a way to really, way that is very good for the animals, very good for the planet, and also very beneficial for our health. So obviously the indigenous people that are still, existing on our planet, they have been hunting and exploiting animals out of necessity. They didn't have options. They didn't have the choice to go to the supermarket and purchase certain products. So there's a big difference between eating and exploiting animals for our culture, for our taste, for our convenience, for pleasure, as I used to do, fishing for sport, eating animals because they tasted good. All the justifications we've used at one point in time, but really is our taste more important than life? Is our pleasure more important than life? And only when I started asking those questions, a little voice in the back of my head was like, bro, you got to sort this shit out, man. Something's going on here. I don't know what it is, but you say you want to protect the planet, you say you love animals, but you're killing and eating them, man. I don't know. It's that little voice that we all need to go into. And for anyone who's not vegan here, we need to explore that. And in going into that voice and realizing, okay, who am I? What do I believe in? Do I stand for compassion? Do I stand for respect? Do I stand for love for myself, for other members of the Earth community? Really, we start seeing some massive shifts in our mindset, in our worldview, and the way in which we interact with this planet. So, if we just going back a step. So, as Claire mentioned yesterday, she was saying a lot of people are vegan, they just don't realize it. And I think this is so true. This is absolutely so true. You ask anyone, do you think it's wrong to cause unnecessary suffering with animals? Yeah, mate, yeah, animal cruelty, it's not good, yeah. Okay, well, let's pick this apart a little bit. For unnecessary purposes, well, is culture a good enough reason? Is that a necessity to exploit and use animals? Is taste, is convenience, is pleasure? None of these reasons are a necessity. And so by the extension of people having this understanding and belief that it's wrong to cause unnecessary suffering, well, unless we're killing animals out of necessity, everything else is unnecessary. And it was very hard for me to realize. And so I can understand the challenges that people would go through when they're asking these questions, because it's very unsettling. I cried myself to sleep after watching a documentary called Cowspiracy, which blew the lid on the animal ag sector. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, is to share this information with people that may not be aware, to crack through our conditioning, to crack through our influences that have led us to interact in the world in the way we do at the moment. It's all about necessity. Apply that to all of our choices. So coming back to this illustration, we've got this ego-eco approach. So if this looks good over here on the right hand side, we need to look at the ways in which we as individuals interact with the world. Do we favour a particular species over ourselves? And I understand there is this intrinsic desire. If there was a house burning, most people would probably go in and save the human child over the dog. Some wouldn't. But we do have this innate draw towards favouring the members of our own species. But it's about extending that compassion and concern to other species. It doesn't necessarily mean kicking all your family out of your house and having animals in your house. It's a bit more practical than that, but if we can minimise our footprint, and that's going to have a positive effect on the environment and animals, we should really give that some serious thought. And so the eco approach isn't about being anti-human. It's not about prioritising every other species and every other member of the Earth community over humans. It's just understanding we want to survive, we want to live, we have families, ways of interacting with the world, and we want to get on and enjoy ourselves. So does every other creature. We don't want to, no mother would want to have their child taken away from them, their kids taken away from them. Yet in the dairy industry, we are impregnating female cows to create milk, to give birth to a cow. We take the cow away because the cow's going to drink the milk that is for humans. We haven't questioned this shit. We need to. We're not baby cows. Why are we drinking, milk from another creature? It's a bit silly. I'd find it a bit more reasonable if some 30-year-old fella was breastfeeding from his mother still. That'd be more normal. That's biologically accurate. If you had to suck the udders yourself, you probably wouldn't be doing it. And so, if we can extend our concern and respect to all other members of the Earth community through understanding that our choices have a very real effect on their lives. If we contribute to purchasing milk, eggs and dairy and all these animal products, animals are going to get killed. They're going to be bred into existence to be exploited, to unfortunately have their throat slit and end up on someone's plate. Now, I wouldn't say that so bluntly a few years ago because I didn't realise that's actually what happens. But I do now, and with that understanding, we're obliged to take action for ourselves, for this planet, for every creature. So one of the things I used to think is, man, okay, but animals, yes. And when the vegans would come to me and say, you've got to respect all life and all this stuff, I'm like, yeah, man, but what about the plants? And they're like, That's a good point. The big difference is plants are living, okay? Plants totally live. They have a form of intelligence which allows them to respond to stimuli and follow the sun as it moves across the sky. They can, send out all sorts of chemicals through their root system and move internally. That doesn't mean they're sentient. That doesn't mean that plants are conscious in a way that an animal is conscious. So yes, a pig is living and a plant is living. Pigs are very intelligent, so is our plant, but just like a computer has a form of intelligence, plants have a form of intelligence. There is a massive difference between putting a knife through a pig's throat and killing a carrot for your evening roast. Massive difference. And if someone can't, I used to believe that it wasn't a difference. It's all life. It all needs to be, if just like, I thought that killing the carrot and killing the vegetables and the plants was just as bad as killing the animals. So delusional. So delusional. There's a massive difference. If we are concerned about the plants, we need to understand that the adoption of a plant-based diet is the best way to minimize our footprint. We're going to be using about 1/18 of the land to feed someone a plant-based diet compared to a heavy omnivorous diet. So anyone who's concerned about the plants should be eating vegan anyway, because they're going to be eating more plants eating meat. So all those plant activists out there got to understand what's happening. So in terms of water use, in terms of the tangible resources, that diet is going to have the smallest footprint. It's not about being perfect. Anyone who says I'm a zero footprint, I've got a perfect track record of no impact, everyone is going to have an impact. Every vegan's going to have an impact. Everyone's going to have an impact, but we can minimize that in so many ways. The biggest way is to cut down and look at our exploitation of animals. And so I feel this is where we are at the moment. We're moving so fast towards an eco-centered, approach, but it comes down to our contributions as individuals. What do we choose to support? How do we want to relate to the natural world? Do we want to step on all the ants? It gets a bit challenging at times as a vegan, realizing there are always ants around. You don't want to hurt them, and oh man, so challenging. But it's no loss to us. I really thought that veganism was going to be a sacrifice, but it's not. It's an absolute joy. And so whatever we choose to support, we're either going to be promoting human-centeredness or we're going to be promoting a worldview that really has us living in an interconnected, interrelated way of relating with the natural world, which is us. So if we can reconnect to our values of compassion, of justice, of love, and realign our actions to those values, through what we choose to support, to what we kill, to what, there's so many things we need to really question. Then we can be living in alignment. And for me, going through that was a very challenging process, but very rewarding at the end of all of that. So one of my little things is reconnect, realign, go vegan, which is what I think we need to do to understand who we are moving into the future. So thank you guys so much for your time and your attention. I really, really appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions, please fire away. Excellent.